Hello all, welcome to Success Channel. Today we are going to discuss about reciprocating territories. Let's welcome our esteemed speaker, Dr. Manoj Kumar. He is founder and managing partner of Hammurabi and Solomon Partners. He is also Vice President, Society of Indian Law Firms, visiting fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, visiting professor at the Indian Institute of Management, Vice Chair, Inter-Pacific Bar Association, Energy and Natural Resources Committee. He is Vice President, Society of Construction Law, UK, India, and an expert at UNESCO Inclusive Policy Lab. He is also named as one of the top 50 lawyers in Asia by Asian Legal Business, top 100 lawyer luminaries of India published by LexisNexis in 2016, top 100 lawyers of India for 2017, 18, 19, 2020 in the list of Indian Business Law Journal, and top 50 lawyers by the Asian Legal Business in 2020. He is expert in merger and acquisition, regulation, strategy, corporate governance, cross-border transactions, TMT, data protection, disputes, crisis protection, project finance, business restructuring, and legal and regulatory compliance across geographies. So let's welcome Dr. Manoj and let's start the discussion. Yeah, so Dr. Manoj, we would like to understand what is reciprocating territory and what are the legal provisions in relation to that?
See, under the Civil Procedure Code that is applicable for enforcement of foreign judgments in India, we have Section 44A, and that has to be read with Section 13 of the Code of Civil Procedure. Section 44A provides for countries or jurisdictions to be notified by the Government of India. And once notified, those jurisdictions constitute reciprocating territory. There are a very limited number of countries who have been notified. Since India is not a signatory to the Convention on Enforcement of Foreign Judgments, India has been relying more on reciprocal bilateral treaties with countries one to one. And as and when these treaties, are signed up, India follows on as a consequent action to notify that concerned country, and that is how we understand the term reciprocating territory, for the purposes of enforcement of foreign judgments in India.
Okay, and is it applicable to civil and criminal cases, both?
Civil cases primarily. For the criminal cases, the issues are slightly different because, as you are aware, in criminal cases, the jurisdiction lies where the place where the crime has occurred. And therefore, for crime which has occurred in the overseas jurisdiction, and the primary court there has to do the trial. And therefore, when it comes to cross-border issues on criminal proceedings, they're typically usually with respect to discovery of evidence, or with respect to recordal of evidence, or with respect to attachment of properties, or in case the accused has become a fugitive of law, and then in a lot of cases trying to apprehend the, so it's either property driven or the fugitive accused driven or evidentiary driven, a witness. So these are the three primary cases. Largely, they are captured under the Code of Criminal Procedure. And we have had instances where, in ongoing trials in other countries, we've had to take help of the criminal justice system in India. And usually, the criminal courts have jurisdiction. Unlike in civil cases, we have the civil courts.
Okay. Can you give us few examples of reciprocating territory?
The list is not very long. In fact, some of the notable names could be the United Kingdom, Singapore, and of course, the Federation of Malaya, Trinidad. So these are the ones, Bangladesh. The last one to be added in the list was the United Arab Emirates. In fact, we for one had been caught in a very unique situation where we had initiated proceedings for execution of foreign judgments from courts from Dubai, as well as related criminal proceedings for attachment of property in the same case. And midway, this notification came through where UAE became a reciprocating territory. So we had to kind of rearrange our strategies and rearrange the forums and the pleadings and the nature of prayer that we seek. It's not a very long list of countries. There are about 12 or 15 odd countries itself which are reciprocating territories. Rest all jurisdictions are fall within the bracket of non-reciprocating territory.
Okay. Should business in India check the status of the country, whether it is reciprocating territory or not, before doing business with that country?
Yes, of course, because it also depends which side are you standing on. I mean, as an Indian entity, if you're doing businesses in some foreign jurisdictions, depends whether you are the supplier or you are the purchaser or you are the reseller or you are a JV partner. Where is the revenue center? Where would the recovery be from? Where would you need to enforce a judgment from a foreign court? Whether the judgment would ultimately have to be enforced against you in India, or you will have to go. So there are a lot of these factors, ifs and buts, which could total up to the issues, which make it very relevant for an Indian entity to evaluate, when they're doing business with the country, whether the country is a reciprocating territory or not, and accordingly make their strategies. And there's no one size that fits all. And we have had situations where, uh, for example, it's a client confidentiality issue, so we will avoid taking any names on the conversations like this. But we have instances where, a judgment passed by a state court of Alabama on the pharma side, top of the line Indian companies, had to be enforced in India. And to a great extent, it could have been stalled in a way because the process took longer and it's a non reciprocating territory. So the Indian side managed to, not managed, but in a way got some more time, a leeway, till a fresh suit was filed in India, and therefore the whole process of a suit had to be completed before it could be become a decree of a local court. So there are advantages on either side, depending on which side are you advising or which side are you acting for.
So, what are the consequences of doing business with non-reciprocating territory? And would you give some examples?
Yes, so the legal business consequences apart, the legal consequences are primarily that in case you're doing business with a country which is non-reciprocating country, if an award if a judgment is passed by a court of that country, you don't get the advantage that is otherwise provided to a reciprocating territory under section 44A. So there is a slightly longer route to take in terms of coming to India, bringing that judgment to India, filing a suit to give effect to that judgment. And you have the choice of filing the suit on the cause of action itself, divorce of the judgment, or relying on that judgment and filing a suit for enforcement, in a way seeking a decree so that that judgment could be converted into an Indian decree and then seek. So all these choices are there. The journey for enforcement becomes slightly longer, and as I said, it depends on which side are you. If the judgment is likely to be against you, it's not something to be overly concerned about. However, it's very important to evaluate a lot of these issues which I mentioned slightly earlier in the conversation, to evaluate all such issues before signing up. And you could always have situations where the court of appropriate jurisdiction in civil matters could be a jurisdiction which is a reciprocating country, and still be doing business elsewhere, all over the globe. So it depends on which side. If you want a slightly tighter regime to be able to enforce the foreign judgment, there are alternatives available there as well. And on the other side, on the flip side, if you're not too keen, or you're not likely to be the person pursuing or trying to get a judgment for enforcement, then the strategies remain slightly different.
Okay, Dr. Manoj, what precautions one must take in an agreement with non-reciprocating territories?
The precautions are, again, there are two sides of the coin here. But if I was to, for a moment, advise a entity which may have a judgment tomorrow to enforce in India, considering that if you belong to a non-reciprocating territory and you have to take a judgment to India for enforcement, the couple of very clear precautions that need to be taken is that there should be absolute clarity in terms of uh, the process to be followed. There should be absolute clarity in terms of documentation, pre-litigation, during the litigation, leading up to the judgment being passed. There should be a special check on some of the negative list that is maintained before the courts, that in case the foreign court has not followed principles of natural justice, or has observed or applied a law which is otherwise opposed to the Indian law or Indian policy, if there is any element which would give a flavor of obtaining the judgment by fraud, or so that such a list is available under the CPC. One should be very careful that while the proceedings are initiated and the judgment is obtained, all of those issues are negated, so that the probabilities and grounds on which the judgment can be challenged in India becomes that much more constricted, and there are better chances of the suit converting that judgment into a decree at a much faster rate. That's one from the side if one was acting for a party who was bringing a judgment to India. On the converse, if I was to be acting for an Indian entity who is likely to be the debtor, judgment debtor rather than a judgment creditor, one would try to keep the dispute resolution and clauses and issues relating to jurisdiction and procedure and process as limited as possible, and let the provisions of law play out as per the provisions of law of the applicable country of residence, or the jurisdiction that is agreed to by the parties, and take our chances there. There are different ways of looking at it, but if that gives you a flavor of how to strategize in the documentation.
Right. Mr. Manoj would like to understand few cases in relation to reciprocating territory, non-reciprocating territory, where Indian parties won or lose the case.
Quite a few cases are there, in fact, for the Indian parties winning and losing both. Some of the cases which we have seen, Indian parties who have been judgment debtors trying to avoid payments. Again, I don't want to take names and sectors because it's a small community and small world, and we all know what we're talking about. But in some instances, we have seen where there has been considerable delay in a foreign judgment being enforced in India. One of the strategies adopted has been like not joining the proceedings in the foreign court, so therefore allowing that entire proceedings to go ex parte. And we have seen that a lot of questions around the proceedings and leading up to the judgment could then be raised by the Indian party at the time of challenging or opposing the suit when it is filed here, or challenging the Section 44A proceedings when a foreign judgment is filed for execution. So that's one way of looking at it, where different variable kind of strategies have been adopted. We, for one, we always recommend that even if you are an Indian party and you are likely to be a judgment debtor, in the long run, the courts always look, enforcement courts or even Indian courts as original site courts, if the suit comes to them, they always look for balance of convenience, and the conduct of parties becomes a very, very, very crucial issue. And therefore, we very strongly recommend to never deliberately avoid proceedings or deliberately allow proceedings to go ex parte, because sooner or later, the entire when you actually seek the indulgence of the court on some grounds which could be genuinely favoring you, on balance of convenience issues, at times the attention and the sympathy of the courts may not come your way. So we very strongly recommend to always join proceedings and play your strategies, or your court strategies or your litigation strategies accordingly in that sense.
What is your view about the legal provisions in relation to reciprocating territories?
India has a fairly, especially after 44A has come in, India has a fairly robust system for enforcement of foreign judgments. I don't think there's an issue with the legal regime that is required for enforcement of foreign judgments. Where we see a gap, especially as professionals, we've seen it quite a bit, is that countries with whom India is doing substantially high volume of business or high volume of transactions, there is still some lack of focus on quickly reaching up to a bilateral agreement so that those jurisdictions become reciprocating territories. So, if you see the list of the countries which are presently notified, a lot of them are financial hubs where actually the actual trade or cross-border investment may be routed through those countries. But there's a big volume of work which is directly being done principal to principal, either as contractors or principal to principal arrangements, manufacturing facilities elsewhere directly supplying to India, and vice versa. So if you see the trade volumes, the bilateral treaties that we are signing up are not matching up there. So that's something which needs to be done a little more to make the legal regime more effective. 44A to be actually available to most people or the larger number of people who are doing business in India. I gave you the example of UAE, for example. We started, there have been multiple occasions when we have had to enforce judgments from there. All the earlier occasions were UAE as a non-reciprocating territory. But on the last occasion, which we had started in 2019, midway this notification came. Of course, the inconvenience was of changing the proceedings was there, converting the suits into 44A. But the fact is that the process became much faster. We were able to achieve the same goals on one third the time, which is beneficial for trade, which is beneficial from costs, which is beneficial for the judicial time that is incurred in giving effect to the same foreign judgments. The quality of the judgment was the same. The court concerned in Dubai was the same. Everything was the same, but for the notification which was absent. And suddenly, one third of or two thirds of the time and energy and cost, everybody's time and energy and cost, the Indian courts, the litigating parties, and the lawyers, in all possible way, legal costs. So I think if that keeps pace, if the process of identifying and signing up to more and more bilateral treaties is kept pace with, I think we'll achieve the desired results behind bringing in Section 44A.
Right, right. So, Dr. Manoj, it was really a great discussion. Thanks for joining Success Channel and sharing your knowledge with all. Thank you very much.
With pleasure, Abhijit. Thanks for having me over.
Thank
All
you.
the very best.
Thank you very much.